Hey, welcome back, everyone. It's a new year for Talk Openly. It's great to be back, and I missed you, Daniel.
I missed you too, Jack. I can't believe it's only been 2 weeks. It feels like there was like a leap year in there or something.
It does, yeah. It's it's really weird. Yeah, I've been feeling the same way. It's felt kind of like unnatural or something.
Yeah, like something's missing. I don't know. I'm like, and I already like I know what it is, but it's
Yeah,
amazing how grounded this show helps me to feel, right?
yeah,
Getting
same.
to talk to you and to sort of touch base and remind ourselves, talk to ourselves about important things, our our values and our goals, our
Yep.
aspirations. All of that. Like it's interesting how doing that on a weekly basis with each other, how incredibly helpful that's been.
Yeah, Sangha is remarkable. So yeah, and for everyone listening tonight, we're part of Lions Roar Dharma Center. We are refuge students of Lama Yeshe Jinpa. And we do this once a week where we get together and talk about different topics. And tonight we're going to be talking about kind of everyday bodhicitta. And we'll talk a little bit about what bodhicitta is, and then yeah, how we can start cultivating it in everyday life and why that's important. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good discussion and something that I certainly need to be cultivating in my life. I feel that for so many reasons, right? One, for liberation, right? It is the gateway to liberation and enlightenment, but also just makes life much better and easier. Wouldn't you say?
I would say that it reduces suffering.
It reduces suffering. Yeah, maybe doesn't make it easier. It's quite
No, I think that it's
challenging.
a hell of a lot easier to go through life with less suffering than more suffering.
True.
So, yeah,
But
no, I
you
don't
know
think
how
they're
like
mutually exclusive.
yeah. But the sense that, sometimes when we like start doing our practice, our training, more obstacles come, right?
Totally.
But
Yeah.
then, how do we approach them? And hopefully it's with a little bit less suffering in our minds. So maybe that doesn't get easy, but in some ways, yes, the suffering lessens.
Yeah, the goal, at some point there is the fruition of the path, right? There is
Mm,
the actual real life, actual bodhicitta rather than just this sort of aspiration towards it, right? And that's what we're aiming for because that is the greatest way for us to help reduce and eliminate the suffering of this world, both ours and that of others.
yeah. Yep, absolutely. That's what we're here for.
That's why we want to become acquainted with our own Buddha nature.
Right. Well, tell me, Daniel, how's your couple weeks been in terms of training and acquainting with your
Yeah.
Buddha nature, all the
Yeah,
things?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, all that. Good stuff. It's been a blissful couple of weeks where I've really leaned into the whole holiday thing by just
that's right.
by backing off of work and actually just taking the time. I'm saying like I'm not working. I've been sort of neurotic with it in the past where I kind of feel like I'm supposed to be there even though nobody else is there, that kind of
Mm-hmm,
stuff.
hmm.
That wasn't there this year, and so there was a lot of relaxation. Everything was really pleasant with the families and the gift giving and all of that stuff. All of it went quite well. And in the midst of all that, um it's life has like sweet and sour, spicy and all this salty stuff.
Hmm.
And in the midst of all that, I've been having for the last few weeks um a decent amount of difficulty at work with my business partners. So we have some conflict, the details of which are not particularly interesting, but we're families. It's a small family business, and there's this
Right.
conflict that is it's business decision making, right? But there's all kinds of there's these battles of ego sort of that have always been there in the past, right? And in the past, when these sorts of conflicts arose, like they just knocked us out, like
Yeah.
we would just not physically, but just beat each other up, very aggressive communication and
Mm,
lots of just confused, messy anger and whatever is what it used to be like in the past. And now it's really interesting because there's still conflict and there's still all kinds of feelings arising and stuff like that. But I'm not joking. Like this practice and this very thing that we're talking about tonight has helped so much because
Mm,
it's taken a lot of the energy out of the equation. So a
mm,
lot of, like it's a highly charged environment. People are going, have a lot of personal vested interest in their own sort of like selfish, self-centered desires and all of that. And it just pulls some of that energy out of the equation. Doesn't solve the problem, doesn't make everybody happy. It's none of that, but
yeah.
it just doesn't make it worse, right?
Yeah.
It's that it's that whole, the first arrow and then the secondary arrow thing, right? Like the
Yeah.
conflict arises, it's gonna happen, right? Like we all have our preferences and our own ideas and things like that. And that's that first arrow because it hurts. Like, God damn it,
Hmm.
I'm not getting what I want and I'm, upset about that.
Yeah.
But then all those secondary arrows that used to be such a source of suffering. I mean, like where it would plague my mind, like it would ruin my sleep and I would wake up thinking about this stuff and go through all kind like sit there looping on thoughts and
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
my God, it was like literally crazy making in the past when this
Yeah.
stuff happened. And now I'm like, it was fascinating. I'm not like, I promise I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or anything,
No,
but
no.
what's really fascinating about this is so one of my business partners is my near and dear brother, right? And it's fascinating to watch as he he still it seems to be expressing in a similar way those old patterns, right? And it's frustrating to him to be met with sort of this like there's not as much reaction. I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
not reactive, but I'm just saying it's a lot less reactive. And because
Yeah.
of that, there's like nothing nowhere for it to go, and it actually sort of seems to sort of aggravate the issue a little bit because he wants to get a rise out of me, right? He wants me to get charged up and wants to do what we've always done in the past, and it's like no, I'm not interested in doing that, like I'm not going down that path now, right? And it's been really really helpful if for no other reason, if even if it doesn't solve any problems, doesn't make anything, but my own sanity, my own anxiety levels, my own sort of neurotic tendencies of my mind, they're still there, but
Yeah.
not in the same, not with the same force, right? Instead of being like a freaking Kodiak bear or something, it's
Yeah.
like a little teddy bear. It's still
Oh,
there, but it's just like it doesn't have any teeth, doesn't have any claws, it ain't gonna do anything, it's all right.
that's a pretty significant
That's what I'm saying, right?
reduction.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So even though that's incidental, that's not why I practice, that's not why I'm doing this, right? It's not in order for me to have some better life experience necessarily. That's not the primary purpose of it, but it is an incidental and quite lovely effect of the practice.
Yeah, to have ease of communication, to not lash out at one's loved ones. Um, you know,
Wait, I gotta tell you though, you're gonna laugh. You're gonna laugh
yeah,
about this.
yeah.
Okay. This is my mediocre sort of skillful means, if you will. So I do not yet have a really integrated practice of right speech.
Mm,
And when I'm responding to in one of these sort of states, I have a tendency to revert back to incredibly violent language, right?
mm,
And super aggressive sort of points of view or whatever. And what's been the way that I've diffused this, I think you
uh.
might be able to tell here, is I just lay it on thick with ChatGPT. I'm like, I get in there and I just bleepity bleep bleep
Oh
bleep bleep
my
bleep,
God.
like this son of a blah blah whatever, and I just like I say, oh, I just let loose, right? And then
Yeah, 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 yeah.
give that to me in a non-violent way.
That's
And then
hilarious.
it does. It's
It
great, dude.
does.
I'm telling you,
Yeah.
man, ChatGPT can bring about some amount of peace just by helping us. Like if we just filtered our language through that, that would be kind of
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. No, that is a good use. That is a good use. Interesting. Um, what I was thinking was like, when you have that tirade in your mind, like sometimes if I like change it into a really like ridiculous voice, like a silly voice, um, like something that's just so over the top and just makes me laugh. Like if I just say
Ooh,
all of that in like a silly voice, it
I'm gonna
kind of
try
just
that. I
it
like
diffuses things.
right.
Sometimes it makes me a little annoyed. Like if I'm really in that state of like, no, I'm actually
Oh yeah.
pissed and I want to get back at
Yeah.
someone, then I'm like, no, that doesn't work for me.
Yeah, then you're like, I am going to come back and I'm going to sprinkle some violence back into this communication because it doesn't
Right.
have enough of it.
Right. Exactly.
I needed just a modicum of violence, just a little bit.
Right. Right. Yeah. Just spice it up, right?
I do, you know what? I actually have my secondary thing is this. So I'll get the mess. I'll work with ChatGPT to get my message, right? And then I'll go back and add some of my own violence to it, so to speak. And then what's really fascinating, talk to my partner. I'll be like, "Hey, you want to read this over real quick?" And she inevitably, every single time she reads it, she's like, "Oh, this is great, but this one little part in here that seems not to be helpful." And every
Uh,
time it's the little jab that I put back in there, the
yep.
little, it's like,
Yeah. You
got
can
you.
feel it. Yeah, you can really feel it.
Yeah, you can.
Totally. Oh man, us messy humans and
Us
our
messy humans.
communication, we're so
Yeah.
messy.
Hey, but just
Uh,
like you were saying about Sangha, like there's no way that we're going to ever become enlightened by ourselves.
right.
We can't practice bodhicitta by ourselves in isolation.
Yeah, we need to have obstacles and we need to have other sentient beings to
That's right. And so
you know,
I have been on a daily basis being like, I am so grateful for my teachers, including the most obnoxious, most difficult, it's the eight
yeah.
verses of mind training come into play on a daily basis where I'm just
Yep.
like, right, even those whom I have benefited, even those that I've done great good for.
Who have scorned me. Praise them, yes.
Yeah, it's like that. So it's a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
fun, it's like serious and it still has all stress and anxiety and strain and stuff like that, but it's like it's not as bad.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Kind of takes the I don't know, the I don't know. They kind of, I was going to say serious, but it is serious, right?
It
But the
is
kind of
serious.
like
Yeah.
haughty seriousness where it's like you take yourself so seriously, right? Where it's like everything I say matters when it really doesn't.
Well, that's the thing, right?
Or
In
everything
all,
I
all
think matters.
Exactly.
Mm,
Always in samsara, what happens is we're blowing shit out of proportions, right?
yeah,
We're taking something and we're just focusing on an extreme aspect of it, right?
right,
Or on a particular aspect in an extreme way, right?
right.
And amplifying either the positives or the negatives, and so
Yep.
much so that we can't see the other. So, like in my case, I'm like, oh man, he is so blah, he's so this and he's so that, and I hate him. And then I'm like, actually, no, 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 that's
Yeah,
not true. So what this does is it creates more space, right? For
right.
all of this stuff to play out. Because when it is so serious, it's only serious because I say it's serious, right? Because it's about me and it's about something really important about me, right? So it gets really tight.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
seriousness, that tightness is not just unpleasant, it's incredibly unhelpful. It's
Yeah.
because you've lost sight. You can't see
Yeah, you've
the
lost
line.
perspective.
You're stumbling around in a minefield blind, right?
Right.
and
Yeah.
and and it doesn't, it's so non-helpful,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
gaining a little bit of context, bringing a little bit of spaciousness to it,
Hmm.
dropping as best I can, as much as it possible, this sort of like this self-centeredness, it not just diffuses, but it creates this spaciousness. And it's kind of like Trungpa Rinpoche has mentioned before, which is this, like we create this like big old vast pasture for our neurotic cows to go and play in, right? So they're not hurting each other. You give them some space. They
Yeah.
don't hurt each other so much.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not gone, but they can graze
You just
happily
graze.
and
Yeah,
chill. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
They
I
don't have to
like
be all
that.
cooped up with each other in this tight
Right.
space, right?
Yeah. It really does feel like tight space. samsara.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why when we think about when we do Tonglen, the feeling when we're breathing in the suffering of others, um, I've heard it said that that feeling is not just dark and sort of like hot, but it's also claustrophobic. It's tight and
totally.
and
Yeah.
and it's confined, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
opposite of that when we're breathing out, right? This all this goodness, this bodhicitta sort of spirit, if you will,
Yeah.
twirl outward. That's like cool and it's spacious and it's
Mm-hmm.
light. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, fun times. Like there's
Fun
opportunity for
times.
practice. There's time to relax. Meditation stuff's going quite well. Daily practice is
Great.
working. Like I'm happy because at the end of the holidays we go back into sort of routine, and I
Mm-hmm.
like that. I
Mm-hmm.
like routine.
Stabilizing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So that's me. What about you, Jack?
I'm okay. Yeah, it's been a roller coaster few months. And it doesn't stop. So this is the ride I'm on. And yeah, I think so. I'm in a little bit of a phase in my Dharma practice where I feel kind of like I'm on an elliptical orbit around my Dharma training, and I'm kind of far out, you know? And there's times where I'm a lot closer to it. And so I feel kind of far out, and like I'm revisiting old wounds and old kind of patterns, old thinking patterns and habits. And I'm like, damn, I really, I thought that this was like good. I thought that this was okay, right? Like I had a pretty good handle on like kind of I have a really like I think my last life was maybe like a deva, like or not a deva, a demigod, where like jealousy, like suspicion, I have a lot of suspicion and just kind of uh you know trying to figure out like who's trying to harm me in
Yeah.
various ways when
Mm.
um I have a very easy life relative to so many people in this world, and no one is actively trying to harm me, you know. But yeah, so I have these kind of suspicions, and um I have a lot of like fear of missing out type stuff sometimes. But with like my Dharma training, I I have to take a lot of time away from everyday kind of like samsaric activities, right? In order to do my training. And for a good few years that felt fine. Like there was no issue with that. I wasn't like concerned about missing out on things. But for whatever reason in the last like, few months I've been feeling that really strongly, like, oh, I want to like, be doing more. I want to, kind of like go out dancing and go to music and all this stuff, which is not inherently a problem, right? And I think, in fact, getting back into dancing has been really helpful for me in terms of kind of like my everyday creative outlet and whatnot. Um, but it becomes a problem for me when I then feel like I'm missing out if I'm at home, doing my Dharma practice. Like
Yeah.
that's a problem, right? And so I'm kind of, yeah, it's just interesting to see myself revisit those things. Um, and I'm not sure what that's about, other than, maybe that's just how training works. Maybe not for everyone, but for me, seems like it.
Do you
Uh,
feel when you're on the outer edge of the elliptical, do you feel a um do you feel the distance from all three jewels, so to speak, right? So I understand
yeah,
what
it's
it
a good
means in
question.
terms of practice. It's interesting though that in my own experience, when I'm in that elliptical and I'm kind of far removed, kind of at the outer edge, then the feeling of this, like the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, right? Like it feels weaker. It feels sort of like
Yeah,
further away, right? And
absolutely. Yeah.
I had this experience not that long ago where I mean I was going through just exactly that kind of a feeling where I was like, I recognize that I'm still in orbit. I'm
Yeah.
not deorbiting,
Right.
but it's
Right.
an elliptical orbit and I'm far away right
Yeah.
now, right? And it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. Like samsara bleeds in it,
Yeah.
right? Like what you're talking about, it begins to like there's this sort of like, whoa, I thought everything was okay, but actually I have doubts now. I have,
Yeah.
like my faith doesn't feel so strong. What am I even doing? I'm sitting here in my closet or sitting here oming away, meditating while my friends are out dancing and having a good life and actually living their lives. And here I am, what
Right.
the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like that.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
mindset. Yeah, for sure.
Right. So
Yeah.
how do
And
you what are you doing with that?
I'm just recognizing it. I do my training every day. Like that's non-negotiable. Like even
Right.
in kind of this state of mind, I'm doing that. Uh, and so maintaining discipline, I think, is very important. Keeping in touch with Lama, like I had Darshan last weekend. And we got to talk about some stuff that I didn't know if I would ever really like care to ask, but some stuff came up around. I've been reading Tsongkhapa's text on the Lam Rim, the kind of middle length Lam Rim. And there's a lot of stuff about hell, all the different hells and whatnot. And we've talked about the hell realms. I've read about the hell realms. I've done Shinrezi practice on the hell realms. But for whatever reason, as I'm reading it this time around, I'm kind of like, damn it, like I don't want to be thinking about hell realms or having to have that kind of like over my head, in part because of religious trauma from childhood and whatnot. And we had a really good conversation about that and how I can be conceptualizing it. And so it's just interesting to see like, okay, it almost feels like I'm going back to these basics, these things that are uh when I first entered the temple, I was kind of like, oh, that's just, but that's just whatever. That's not really what we're, talking about. But there's a lot about these different kind of realms and states of being and states of mind that are really important to be examining. And so, yeah, it's just interesting to see how, like, on the kind of the ellipsis where I'm out here, it's almost like I can tap into these kind of more like maybe base doubts and fears that I can then kind of get some clarification on with my teacher. That's really helpful. Um, and so it's interesting. There's this kind of like push and pull with where I'm at, where I'm kind of like, okay, I can see how maybe my a little bit of distance I can touch in with some things that I otherwise wouldn't. I don't know. Maybe that's finding a silver lining or something. But um, that part has been interesting too.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. Yeah, I find it one of the things that I find interesting about that part that you just described, where we revisit concepts or revisit teachings or whatever.
Mhm.
There's it's weird how like we think we understand something and then something happens and like now we're thinking about that exact same thing from a different perspective and
Yeah.
the understanding sort of deepens. And it seems like
Mhm.
Dharma practice in general is like that. Like there's I've been thinking about this a lot recently about how when we first show up, it's like maybe you're told, hey, try some mantras, Om Mani Padme Hum, right? What does that mean? Doesn't really matter. Just recite that, do that, whatever, 100 times, and do that a few times, right? And then the person does that, and there are some kind of like changes, some kind of benefit, some kind of calming to it, right? And they're like, oh, okay, it's like a magic spell or something. And then
Mm,
as you move further and further, the understanding of what it means and what you're doing and why you're doing it and how it shapes your life evolves and it changes completely.
yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that that's a never-ending process, is what it seems like to me, is that
Yeah.
probably even after you've been doing this for 100 lifetimes, right? And then like you approach it again, well now you're
Yeah.
something new unfolds, right?
Right. Right. Well, and that's so funny. That reminds me of this one time that I had darshan with Lama. and I had just started practicing this meditation from the Dalai Lama on kind of like the emptiness of the self. And and I'd done it like one time and then like came and talked to Lama about it. And I remember saying something like, am I supposed to like feel something? Am I like supposed to feel something different? And he was like, what are you expecting? Like that was the one time that he had like this kind of edge with me where I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of ridiculous. And so, you know, his point was like, we have to do this over and over and over again, familiarizing our minds over and over again. And sometimes with the most, what seems like so basic, which is like love, compassion, you know, these terms that you know, I think that I know what they are, and yet they're so deep, they're so complex, and so just familiarizing constantly, and even the things that you know, I can feel like okay, I got some kind of hold on this, like meditating on all sentient beings as having once been my mother, right? You know, that beautiful meditation. Every time, you know, there's going to be kind of like you said, there's these this different experience of it. And so, yeah, how interesting that unfolding, that layering that we get to experience. And it's not linear. You know, I think that's another thing with like my very Western kind of academic mind is I'm expecting things just to progress,
Right.
right? That like, okay, I read that book and so I get it, right? And it's just that's not the case. It's just not the
No,
case.
no, it doesn't, it hasn't, certainly hasn't been the case here. There is this, it definitely has that labyrinth feeling where you're covering sometimes what feels like the same ground, coming closer. You think you got it, and then you go far away. It's
Yeah,
very much like that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I'm glad that you're still in orbit though.
Thank you. Yeah, me too. And
Yeah.
I know that this helps me immensely. So just staying
Same.
connected with Sangha is
Yeah,
huge.
well, speaking of which, I don't usually when I get a message from anybody, like a text message or whatever, and somebody says, "How are you?" I don't ever respond genuinely. I mean, whatever. I don't even usually I don't even reply to something like that, right?
Yeah.
But I was talking to a Sangha member or messaging about something else, and then they were like, "Hey, how are you? How's it going?"
Mm.
And I was like.
Uh,
I don't like, come on, really, it's a text message, and I don't really. And then I thought, well, no, really, how am I? I used it as an opportunity to check in, and I realized that it was exactly what you just described, exactly that. This is like a few weeks ago, and then I said, hey man, I'm going through some challenges in my practice. I'm having a hard time, and I'm feeling pretty depressed and upset about this, and I feel this distance from the three jewels, right? Like I really feel not disconnected, but I feel a lot of distance. I'm like, I don't feel close or
yeah.
intimate with it all, right? And and his response was, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get some kind of sympathy, or maybe he'll come running and like buoy my spirits or something.
Mm,
And he was like,
mm-hmm.
without challenges, we wouldn't be called to investigate any further.
Mm.
And that was
Yeah.
it. And I was like, God damn it, he's right. All
Like,
right.
fine. Okay.
Thanks a lot for the support. But it was actually
It
supportive.
was
It
support.
was
Yeah.
supportive. It wasn't what I
Yeah.
wanted to hear, but it was what I
Right.
wanted to hear.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that does it does help for me to know like okay, you know, you've been there, right? In
Yeah.
just recent times
Yeah.
and so it's part of the
But
path.
isn't that, Jack? That's one of the really nice things about having done this for a little while, right?
Yeah.
So, we're both relative beginners, right? But we've been around enough that we begin to see these patterns
Oh
emerge,
yeah.
right? And before, I would be like, if I entered into this sort of like turbulent, like weak, sort of on the outer edges, my faith would be deeply called into question, right? I'd be like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. I'm gonna bounce. I'm out.
Mm,
I'm like,
mm-hmm.
I don't think this is good. I'm gonna bounce, right? Is the way that my mind would go before. And now what I notice is this kind of something that Lama was talking about on Sunday, where I'm like,
Mm,
doesn't really matter what anybody thinks. I'm gonna keep doing this. I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in. I'm gonna keep doing it. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what I'm thinking or feeling about in the moment. I'm just gonna keep going, right?
Right.
Because I actually it's weird, but like I don't have anywhere better to go. I don't have anything better to do.
Yeah.
I haven't discovered anything better than this, right?
I
Like
know. Right. That's the
nothing that
thing is
says,
that,
yeah.
yeah, like I've been doing so much more kind of like external activity the
Hmm.
last few months, since my partner is dating other people now, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I gotta get out there.
Yeah.
And the intensity is less now
Yeah.
around that, but um, doing things that are like conventionally fun, right, and interesting. And my happiness is not more. Like, in fact, it is much less. And so it's such a reminder that like this training really is what brings me peace and happiness and fulfillment, you know?
Right.
And it doesn't mean that I can't go dancing or date people, but to do
Wow.
so with a different mindset, not of that just intense attachment and fear based. Yeah. So
We're always, I mean, in some fashion or another, we're all looking outside of ourselves for something to complete us, make us feel whole
yeah.
and satisfied. Some people it's drugs, some it's relationships, others it's work. It doesn't matter, right? The eight world
Mm-hmm.
concerns, right?
Yeah.
It's all there and we're all doing it, and it always leads to the same sort of samsaric results where we're like,
Right.
oh, all right. Like this didn't the pleasure didn't last, but the pain was around for a while or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then we realize like, right, actually all of these teachings and this practice and this community and all of this is so like it's weird because it's like it's sort of even though it's super complex and complicated and all of that, it's also incredibly simple and to the point. Like
Yeah.
anyone can do this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's sort of this weird sort of feeling of like, man, this somewhat basic old thing that's been around that, has been around for a long time and explored from many different points of view, still incredibly relevant to my own life. Like that's
Yeah.
amazing.
It still hits. It
It
still hits.
still hits. Yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. Yeah, it hits a lot better than the other stuff. It's a
That's
little bit,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a little bit more satisfying.
Well, buddy, let's do some mind training.
Oh yeah, that's
Let's get some Lojong up
I
there.
thought you'd never ask. I thought we were
I
just gonna kind
had a
of
lot to catch up on, so
we had a couple of weeks worth of stuff to catch up on here. All right, you can see my page now, right?
I can see it.
All right,
Yeah.
let's get ourselves a Lojong slogan.
All right.
Drum roll, please.
This is the uh one of two English random Lojong slogan generators out in there in the world. So check it out. Okay. So, okay, I'm just gonna say a Zoe is a female yak. All right. So Lojong slogan 34, don't shift a Zoe's burden to an ox. And let's see what Charla Kebyon has to say. Tibetans value their Zoe, female yak, far more than their oxen. So even though a Zoe is stronger than an ox, a Tibetan would typically think if the ox dies, I can easily replace it. But a new Zoe would cost me dearly. So I'll make the ox carry this load, even though it isn't really strong enough. We often employ the same logic in our relationships with others. I'm going to need some help on this one. Let's What do you think? What's kind of the I've seen this one before, but I haven't done a lot of thinking with it. And the sense that I get, the immediate sense that I get, is that sometimes I'm thinking in my own life, putting too much pressure maybe on loved ones in general or on people in general, and that it's unnecessary. And also like my burden,
Right.
right? Like my burden of my suffering, or my burden of my path, not to put that on other people. I don't know. Does that resonate with
It
you? Is
does.
that
No, it
what you
does.
think?
It
Okay.
does resonate. That's actually what I was thinking of as well, Jack. What I was thinking was, um, you know, we we all have this tendency to believe that people in our immediate environment that they function for us,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And as such, like we have this sort of like we objectify beings,
Yep.
people,
Big time.
and we relate them to us and to our preferences and our needs and our wants, right?
Hmm.
And so there's this sort of desire to make other people take responsibility for things that are really it's our thing, whatever it happens to be, right? And I know I'm speaking from my own personal experience, is that that's the way that it feels, is that there's this
Hmm.
expectation that others are supposed to bear the responsibility of my life somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not. Even this, I've been thinking about this a decent amount in relationship to my conflict with my brother, business partner, right? Where I'm like, no, actually, there's two, in many cases, I've done exactly this, right? I've without going into the details of that particular conflict, there's this realization where I'm like, oh, my capacity, his capacity, to deal with and take responsibility for whatever
Yeah.
the situation is different.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
different,
Right.
right?
Right.
There's all kinds of attributes and qualities that I don't have that are really valuable. That's what makes it a good partnership. But
Hmm.
recognizing, oh, hey, you know what? Actually, I've been making somebody else carry my freaking load, right?
Yeah.
Whatever
Yeah.
that is, right? That's my responsibility. And it's okay, like children, for example, we want them to be active participants in the household and clean up their messes and do chores and do all these things. But you know what? Their capacity is different, not just
Right.
energetically, but just mental, all kinds of different ways, right?
Sure.
It's just different. And so
This is different.
recognizing what a person's capacity is, and recognizing like, hey, I have the capacity, right? Hopefully,
Right.
if we're doing all of this training and we're doing all of this practice, the whole freaking point of it is to increase our capacity to
Right.
be responsible for life and not just our little personal life. We now, because we want to be bodhisattvas, right? We want to embody this bodhicitta, right? We want to take responsibility for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Whole
Yeah.
thing. Everybody's suffering. But instead, we have this old, habit pattern of making our problem somebody else's concern.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting that you say that about like your capacity is different. And I imagine also like it's growing, right? Your capacity in general in your business, your life, and relationships and whatnot. And I've noticed that myself too. And sometimes there's this little like nagging part of me that occasionally comes up where I'm like, well, I'm doing a lot, so like
Yeah,
they should do more, you
right,
know?
right.
And
I,
so this slogan I think is touching on that too, where it's like,
right,
no, 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 no. Like if you're the strong one in this
right.
particular situation, take that on
Yeah.
and don't be a jerk about it.
Also the other way around, I would say, maybe in some cases recognize when it's right to shift the burden from the zo to the ox, right? And the reason I
Mm,
say that is that I've been realizing that because I have a teacher-student relationship with Lama Jimpa, um, and because he's so experienced, and because I view him as a Buddha, right? And he has right? Like he has all this capacity, this immense capacity that we've talked about before for trying to help people, right? To reduce suffering.
mm,
That he's a Zoe in this case, right? Like
mm-hmm.
he's strong and he's valuable and all that. And
Yeah.
in this relationship, I have this sort of like I'm supposed to receive. It's like, hey, I come to you and you give to me, right? And sure, like I can try to be helpful and supportive or whatever. But like, hey, what about my role in all of this, right? Like
Totally. Yeah.
he has to listen to my complaint. He doesn't have to anything, but he does
Mm-hmm.
listen to me and my nonsense and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
patiently generous with his time and all that, giving me good advice. And then I don't even go and apply it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Sometimes I do,
Right.
sometimes I don't, like
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and yeah, that our sangha is kind of like we are to take on some of that burden, right? Because we want to spread our teacher's teachings and we want to
yeah.
share his vision and wisdom. And so, yeah, you're right that it is necessary to take that some of that burden, the burden that is unnecessary for him to be carrying, right? Because he's got
Right.
better stuff to
Maybe
do.
I shouldn't plague him with my, complaints about whatever, some experience that I had at IKEA or.
Or we shouldn't have him, like, he shouldn't be vacuuming, right? Or like bringing a dish to the potluck, like we do those
That's
things.
right.
or
That's right.
or like organizing community events, like, yes, he's involved, but we should be doing those things, right? So taking
Exactly.
those burdens, yeah.
Right. Right.
Okay, who's this beautiful creature?
Varahi
Rahi, cool. Is that a pig face?
isn't,
It
I'm sorry, but
kind of looks like a,
isn't Varahi, isn't that Vajrayogini?
I don't know, honestly, I don't know, but
Let me do a quick,
looks
I'm
kind
just
of
curious.
looks kind of like a,
Varahi.
yeah, Vajravarahi. I gotta open my
Varahi.
Vajrayogini sadhana soon. I did one recently. That's
Uh,
cool. Okay, great.
okay,
Thanks,
all
Dirk,
right,
for all
all
the
right.
all the
Yeah,
images.
yeah. Varahi is one of the matrikas, a group of seven mother goddesses in the Hindu religion.
Interesting. Okay,
Ah, okay. All right.
cool.
Okay.
Learned something
Vajra
today.
Varahi right there. Wonderful. Sorry, I got a little distracted.
All right, that was great. We've already covered a lot of ground
Yeah, but
today.
let's talk about Bodhicitta.
Let's talk about bodhicitta. Um, so yeah, I was thinking about this kind of everyday bodhicitta, because I'm reading the middle length treatise on the Lam Rim. And this is Tsongkhapa. And I was just thinking about how it's sometimes, for me, it can feel like it's very aspirational, right? And it ties into kind of the prayers that we're supposed to be doing every day, right? Aspiring to become a Buddha so I can benefit all beings. But sometimes there's a disconnect for me with the kind of the aspiration and the actual daily life interactions with others,
Mhm.
where that is really where I would like to be developing bodhicitta, right? Rather than just in my mind, which is important, right? These all these trainings that we have on developing bodhicitta, love, compassion, through meditation, extremely important. But then there's also, am I actually taking that to my real life? Because as Lama says, this training is for everyday life. It's for reality. And so, I wanted to talk a little bit about relative and ultimate bodhicitta, but also just kind of how do we do it? What do we do in kind of our daily lives?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, what could you tell me, a little bit about what or have come to understand about, like, about relative bodhicitta or ultimate, whatever you want to start with.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's a continuum, right? Between this aspirational bodhicitta versus the ultimate bodhicitta. And we're on that continuum somewhere, right? And the relative bodhicitta, I think that we've talked about this, you and I, before when we talked about spiritual materialism. But in the beginning, the reason why most people show up to a Dharma center or start studying Buddhism is because life sucks. Something sucks,
Yeah.
right? Things are not okay. We're hurting, or those around us are hurting, and that causes us pain, or there's some difficulties, right, that we want to resolve. And so because of that, we're drawn to something that promises some relief.
Mhm.
And then, we hear, oh, hey, you're going to do these practices, and these practices will, this is about developing bodhicitta, the awakened mind, the awakened heart for the benefit of all beings, is altruistic, so on and so forth. And you hear some of the message and you don't quite get it, but you're like, that all sounds really good. And I can do that. That's groovy, right?
Right.
Oh, to benefit all sentient beings. Oh, yeah, heck yeah, that sounds really good. Let's do it. And so then people, people kind of start, And that's, I think, the beginning of the continuum is this just this desire to reduce our own suffering, right? And,
Totally.
and that's like that the beginning of relative bodhicitta. And then the practices are all doing this thing, right? They're all this mind training, which all of it is, the meditation, the praying, the getting together as a sangha, these things, it's all training, right? And it's
Mhm.
training us towards cultivating greater bodhicitta. And the way that it does that is by counteracting the practices, counteract our habitual self-centeredness, right?
Right.
And we don't get it. We actually don't know until quite a bit later what we're talking about when we're talking about self-centeredness, because on a superficial level we're
Mm,
like, yeah, I know morally I shouldn't be so selfish and I should think about other people or whatever, but it turns out that it's something incredibly pervasive, right? It's so there's
yeah.
something deeply rooted in us, in our being, that isn't it manifests at all different levels, right? And we begin to understand it more and more and more, and to see how this nature of misperceived self, how it causes a lot of suffering, right? And
Hmm.
how
Hmm.
even though we're not intending to hurt anybody, right? Just like you said earlier in the show, like you don't like your mind is like, oh, who's out to get me? Who's trying to hurt you? Nobody. Literally, there isn't a human being on this planet trying to hurt you right now, right? Like me either. There isn't anybody trying to hurt us. There are people who will hurt us, right?
Hmm.
Because they don't know. They don't,
Yeah.
they're just not aware of where we're coming from, or our needs, wants, desires, hopes, aspirations. Or it could just be that they're so self in their own head, thinking their own thoughts, living their own lived experience with their own personal narrative and everything, that they're not even thinking about you, right? Not even
Mm,
a little bit. And because we're the same way, we have that
yeah.
same tendency, like it causes a lot of trouble. And we begin to become aware of this, like, oh, oh, they're hurting me because of this, and I'm hurting them because of this. And then that gives rise, I think, to the, graduating along the continuum to ultimate bodhicitta, right? Which only manifests when we have realized emptiness and interdependence,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because
Yeah,
then
that
it
there's
is
no divide.
there's
Hmm.
no faking it at that point. You're doing it. You're
Yeah.
being it. You are the lived experience of bodhicitta.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting. There's a real method, right? There's a real like science, in fact, I
Oh
think,
yeah.
to developing bodhicitta. And so, looking at the Lam Rim is incredible, right? Because we have it laid out for us. We're incredibly lucky, right, to have this science of mind. And one of the things that I found really important and helpful for me was these kind of sevenfold instructions for training in bodhicitta. And just like Lama says a number of times, it's about compassion in the beginning, compassion in the middle, and compassion in the end. And it's like these kind of growing, phases or stages of compassion, right? And something that Tsongkhapa says is that we start with people that it's easy to feel compassion for, right? So we don't need to go to kind of like
Mm.
our worst enemies. We can start with, our dog, right? Start with your cat, start with your mom, right? Start with people who are really easy to feel compassion for. Um, and then kind of expanding out. And the next one after that is kind of seeing sentient beings as our mothers. So when we've been able to develop some compassion, then kind of expanding it to all beings through that meditation on, actually, yeah, when I really, if I I look at kind of the nature of reality and rebirth, then it's impossible for me to not have been related to every single sentient being. And so, how could I not have some kind of feeling for that being? And then meditating on their kindness and on repaying their
That's
kindness.
right.
And so, yeah, I found that really interesting that like bodhicitta, that wish for all beings to be free, that we can really develop that by considering, how have people been kind to me when I've been, suffering,
Hmm.
and this kind of desire to be able to give back. Um, So yeah, I thought that was really beautiful that, okay, thinking about where have I been taken care of? And it's my entire life,
Your whole
right?
life,
Like there's my whole life
your
is
whole life.
evidence
Right.
of being other beings being kind to me.
Yeah. Yeah, you only exist because of all of these other beings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful meditation to reflect on that. Yeah, couldn't
Yeah.
agree more. And my sense is that those instructions, that science is, it seems to me that it's a lot like cultivating a field, right? Because we're trying to we talk about like bodhicitta, may that which has arisen, not diminish but grow evermore, and may that which has not, isn't here yet, may grow and flourish, right, so to speak.
Mhm.
And that we're looking for the fruits of these practices, this bodhicitta. And to me, it seems like, kind of along the lines of what you were talking about earlier with this sort of circling or the labyrinth, is that it's like we come across, like we start up and we have like not just hard compacted soil, but we have asphalt, right? And
Yeah.
we have rebar and all kinds of stuff in there. And we have to take multiple passes again and again using these scientific, well-proven
Yeah.
techniques, right? Where it's very, hey, start simple, just real little, just say a little prayer for somebody in the morning and that's it, right? Or whatever, a little tiny thing. And then you keep going over again and again and again, and eventually you get down, you've worn off that sort of that hard layer, and there's like, wow, beautiful dirt. But no, that dirt, it needs to be tilled and it needs to be nourished and it needs all kinds of stuff. And then like now you've tilled it, but there's big old clunks and there's rocks that need to be removed and there's whatever. And then eventually you're like, all right, I've done all this and now the field is fertile. That's all that mind training in advance,
Yeah.
right? Like that's the aspirational relative bodhicitta,
Right,
is all
right.
this work of preparing the ground, right?
Yeah.
Ground is hard. It's impenetrable, right? It's like
Right.
ain't nothing, no rain of bodhicitta is soaking into that ground, right? It's
Mm,
repelling it. And so we just have to keep working and working till it becomes receptive and can hold
hmm.
some of it, right? And then we plant these beautiful little seeds in there and we perfect those perfections, those little seeds, and we watch them grow.
Yeah.
And there's the beautiful fruit that comes from it, right? But it's a journey.
It
It's
is a journey.
and it's
Yeah,
an
and how
iterative thing. We have to keep
interesting
going.
too. The metaphor too is so spot on with that, the ground never went anywhere too, right? Like
Oh,
it's always been there. But it's been covered over, or the weather has been,
yeah,
bad or whatever it is. And so the mind has always been there. That, ground of absolute bodhicitta has always been there, is there. But it's just, it's been covered up by various, kind of
right.
obscurations. And so that, yeah, that science of really, really uh taking in how much I am just completely inseparable from other beings.
Yeah,
And feeling their suffering, and um developing equanimity, right? I think is such an important part of this. It's one of the four immeasurables. And seeing that, I am no different from any other sentient being. My loved ones are no different from my enemies in terms of, their want for happiness and to be free of suffering. And to let that break you apart in a way, right? Like the breaking of that asphalt. There's that hard shell that needs to open up. But I've found that, when I am in a receptive space, or I've created a receptive space to engage with these meditations, it is so powerful. To really recognize, like, oh, right, yeah, there's just nothing I could be, when I'm in that state, there's nothing that I could be mad at or defend or whatever it is. It's like,
mhm.
bodhicitta really is our refuge. It's our safety, to love and completely, care for other beings. I think, yeah, there's just nothing other.
I've had a difficult time with it, when I first, because I kind of stumbled into Buddhism, right? I didn't, it
Totally.
wasn't super intentional. And when I first came across this, what bodhicitta is, I was like, oh, okay, sounds good. And then I was like, but it's inauthentic. Like, I don't actually feel that way. I really don't.
Totally.
I truly do not think that or believe that,
Yeah.
right? Like, I don't even want that. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't like people. I don't care what happens to them, right? If they all go to hell, that's fine. I've probably been wishing that for them for years, right?
Uh-huh.
And that was how I felt. I remember talking to Lama Jimpa about that, and yeah, okay, all right, well, just and he's always encouraging to continue to develop bodhicitta. And I'm like, well, how? It
Yeah.
feels fake. Like it doesn't even feel
Yeah,
real.
yeah, yeah.
How do I do it? And then the first thing he told me, okay, the four measurables, right? Maybe reflect on that. And I was like, what? Just recite them again and again and again, just words, and
Mm.
he's like, yeah, Daniel, try that. And I was like, I was so mad. I was just like, really? I'm gonna go off and just like recite this thing again and again and again. Okay,
Yeah.
so I go off and do it, and eventually it begins to break. It
Yeah.
took a while
Yeah,
because
it
it was all
does.
kind
Yeah.
of hard layers, and it begins to kind of crack a little bit, right? So then the last few times that I've been, that I've met with him, he continues to remind me. He says, Bodhi, this frustrates me, right? Or it has frustrated. Breathing in, bodhicitta, breathing out, bodhicitta. And I was so like, that's some gibberish. You're just
Uh-huh.
like, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
respect him, but I'm like, there's part of me that's like, nah.
Yeah.
But then the dang thing, like that little mantra right there has grown and grown and grown. That notion
Yeah.
has ripened my practice in a way like quickly, very quickly,
Yeah.
and had immediate results, right? And it's always the same kind of thing where it starts real simple, just like, hey, just do this little thing, right? And you do that little thing and you're like, hey, something happened. Okay, it's a little better or whatever. And then it's like it just keeps, as we've been talking about, it just keeps developing and it keeps growing. And you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, holy shit, what is this?
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, actual compassion.
Like I actually
What
feel
is
it. Like
that?
it's really there, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
not making
Yeah.
this up. I'm literally sitting here contemplating how I can be of service to life itself and not just to me personally.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
amazing.
That
Whoever
is
would have thought
amazing.
that this guy would be like that? Not me, that's for sure.
Good work, buddy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
Good,
pretty
good
rad.
work, buddy. I'm proud of him too.
One of my kind of quick things that I found helpful is like uh anytime I feel annoyance, that's like a cue. Like,
Yes.
okay, suffering. Like I feel annoyed about this person because they're suffering.
Yep.
So no
Yeah.
need to be annoyed. Just be kind, right? If I can, So this is kind of like those little cues, right? Just like
Exactly
breathing
that.
in, bodhicitta, breathing out, bodhicitta. Oh, I feel annoyed, bodhicitta,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I
And we can
feel kind of, I'm mad that I got kind of in traffic. Ah, bodhicitta. Okay,
That's
good,
right.
good.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And when we do sort of not exhibit compassionate, wise behavior. Hopefully, if on the next in and out breath, we recognize that that's what happened and we go, oh, right, my intention was not, I didn't act in accordance with my intention. And then that's that training that the next time we get cut off, we're like, oh, hey, remember that's not what we want to be doing. Right.
Right, right. Yeah, you got to steep our minds, huh?
It really is. I mean, I think that whole like hard ground rain thing, that whole
Yeah,
metaphor, I think that works. We have to
I
like
like it.
really soften it up, right?
Yep.
And, like make sure that it's porous and it can receive all of the
Yeah,
rain of bodhicitta.
yeah, hell yeah. Good
Yeah.
metaphor usage today. We got the labyrinth, we got the ellipsis, we got ground. We're
Look
doing
at
it.
us. We're on a roll. It's the new year, new us.
New Year, new us. That's right. Well, friends, it was so great to meet Daniel. This has been wonderful. For folks listening, if you're able to make even just a small donation to Lions Road Dharma Center on the website, we'd super appreciate it. It helps us pay the mortgage, keep the lights on, all the things. So,
Hey, one more plug though. Even if you
yeah.
ain't got no money,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
consider maybe possibly becoming a member. Leave a good review on Google or Yelp or
Right.
whatever, right? Like just contribute in some way, a little bit of
Yep.
time, a little bit of effort, something.
Love that. Awesome.
All right.
Take
Thank you,
care.
Jack. Bye,
Forward
everybody.